Hello and welcome to my channel. My name is Lynn and today I am going to decorate the Graphic 45 stacking circle boxes. So when you purchase this, it actually comes as a set of 2 boxes. And I did a reel for Graphic 45 on how to decorate the larger of the two. And here I've got the smaller, and basically they're pretty much the same idea in terms of how you would approach decorating these. So it may seem a little bit hard to decorate a circular box, but it's actually pretty easy if you have a set of nested circle dies. I just found a pair that works, one slightly larger for the top, and if you wanted, you could even decorate the bottom of the box too, although most of the time, I don't think you'll see that, but you could. And then a slightly smaller circle die for the inside of the box. So those two, you would need either what I use, nested circle dies, or if you have one of those circle cutters, you could use one of those as well. That would work just as well. The size of the my die cuts anyways for the outside of the box happens to be 5 1/8 of an inch. And then for the inside of the box, it is closer to 4 7/8, maybe around 4 3/4, 4 7/8, somewhere between there. So those are the sizes I was working with, but there's a little bit of wiggle room there. It just depends on how much of a border you want to have. For the outside of the box, it's actually pretty easy as well. You just need a couple of strips. Now, I'm using the Graphic 45 Amour Deluxe Collector's Edition, and there's always a couple of papers that have some cut aparts, some borders, and that's what I've decided to use for the outside of my box. It happens to be close to 5, I would say about 5/8 of an inch. You could go slightly more than 5/8, but I was really just guided by the height of the border strips. And there's actually 2. So there's one, and here I'm cutting from the 12-inch papers, and you'll need 2 strips. You won't use all of the second strip. You'll have a little bit left over, but in order to cover the entire circumference of the outside of the box, you will need 2 12-inch long strips that are roughly 5/8 of an inch tall. For my for the decorative part of the lid, I've die cut from the 8x8 papers. I think scale wise that print works a little bit better, but the border strips on the 8x8 weren't quite the right height. So that's why I really appreciate having both the 8x8 and the 12x12, because sometimes things are scale-wise going to work a little bit better than in a slightly larger print as opposed to a more scaled down print. Because remember, the 8x8, it's not that they take an 8x8 section of the 12x12 papers, they actually shrink everything down. And here's another example of just mixing and matching between the two, because I want one of these square tiles to be my focal sentiment image, as opposed to, because the 8x8 version of it is a little bit too small, I felt. This is the 8x8 version. So you can see it's rather small, doesn't fill the space quite as well. And so that's why I wanted to take one of these tiles from the 12x12. I'll use that as my focal image. And then the rest I'll use as accents. Originally, my idea was to have multiple of the smaller tiles, just mixing and matching. But ultimately, I ended up not using the smaller tiles. I just stuck with that one strip that almost to me reminds me of a film strip. So that's how I was treating that element. And I also scanned some of my scraps left over after cutting the initial circles to decorate the top and the bottom of the box. And I just fussy cut out some images just to kind of border, to give a little bit of an accent. I want to keep everything a little bit simple, but I do want to collage up a few pieces. So I found this woman, I think her profile is really pretty, and so I wanted to use her, and I like the scale of her as well. So I want to add her, and again, I just fussy cut her. One of the things I like to do when I'm collaging like this is to ink all of the edges, and sometimes I forget, but I try to remember if I can to ink the edges of anything that I cut, because all of the papers they do have a white core. So if you want for everything to kind of especially if you're like me and you're not like the best fussy cutter, just inking the edges with a little bit of black is just fine. If you have something sepia tone, that works too. I didn't mind using black because I love the color palette of Amour. There's some, they don't, shy away from like your really strong black colors. And so black I think works just fine as something that you can kind of ink the edges with. Although with all of the pinks, you could maybe also use the Graphic 45 hybrid inks. There's also a darker red that you could use, and even the peachy pink color you could maybe use as well. So there's some options there, but black works really well, especially for the fussy cut images that I'm using, because I actually took that from one of the patterns that is kind of more or less black and white. And so if my fussy cutting didn't leave a perfect border all the way around, when you after I ink the edges, you really can't tell. So that's why I love to ink edges like that. Now, what I am doing as I collage up my scene here is I'm actually gluing things down right off of the edge of the circle. And then I'm using the exact same circle die to cut those edges off. And that way I get a perfect cut. And you could collage everything and then just do one final cut at the end to cut off all of the edges. But I kind of like to cut as I go, mostly because for me, it just helps me visualize the composition a little bit better if I don't have a bunch of things that are hanging off the edge. I just have a hard time visualizing it not being there. So for me, it's worth a little bit of extra time just to run it through my die cutting machine to trim that off each time I have something that is hanging off the edge. You do want to make sure, though, that as you are doing this, that you really line up your die where the original cut line is, so that you're not accidentally trimming into your circle and changing kind of its shape at all. But you should be able to do that, and you can always tape it down with a little bit of low tack tape just to prevent it slipping or nudging as it's going through your die cutting machine. And for me, this is sort of the fun part, just collaging things up. And I'm trying to, with this flower here, I'm actually trying to cover up that bit of red just so that the darker red of the sentiment is more prominent. Because it's surrounded by more or less kind of black and white images. And so that was my thinking, as I was placing things, but I'm not the strongest. Collaging is not, a super strong suit of mine. And it takes me a really, really long time to land somewhere that I'm happy with. And I often need input from other crafty friends, from my husband, and before I actually settle on a composition that I like. But once that's done, applying these strips is really, really easy. So I just put some double-sided adhesive along both long edges so that it's as close to the border as possible. And I'm doing the same here as well, just getting adhesive as close to the border as possible, but then squiggling on some liquid adhesive as well, just to really make sure that it's a nice permanent bond and it's not going to peel off over time, especially since it's on that curve. You really want to make sure that everything is well attached. That's why I am burnishing as I go. And one thing to note, so the box, it does have a seam, that craft color paper that's lining everything. There is a seam, and I like to try to position it so that the seam is on the back. And when you attach your pattern paper, because we do need 2 strips of paper, there's going to be 2 seams. And so I want to position that more towards the back as well. So with that first full length strip, I positioned that towards the front and then had it, going off towards the back so that our seam is pushed, as far back as possible. And it's a small detail. I don't know how much people will notice that, but just something that you might want to take note of. I forgot to ink the edges of my these strips here. So I did it after the fact. I don't recommend that because it's hard to avoid inking up the box a little bit too. So definitely do as I say, don't do as I do, because I would highly recommend inking everything before you glue it down. But that is the smaller of the 2 boxes. And if you check out my reel from earlier, then you can see the larger version as well. And of course, I'll post pictures to my Facebook page and also to my Instagram page. Thanks for checking out this video. If you liked it, please consider hitting that like button, commenting, and even sharing this so more folks can see it. And if you're already subscribed to my channel, thank you so much. I really appreciate it. And if you haven't already subscribed, I hope you'll consider doing so and ringing that notification bell so that you can get notified whenever I post new videos to my channel. Thanks again. Until next time, happy crafting and have a fantastic day. Bye.